everyone, and welcome to another Dominion Day edition of Live Like a Pioneer. Today we are going to be talking about some picnic etiquette as well as a picnic and Victorian favorite, Victoria Sponge or Victoria Sponge Cake or Victoria Sponge sandwiches. Just depends on who you ask. So first I'd like to read you a tiny bit about Victoria Sponge Cakes. So these are the ingredients that we need. This is from Sir John's Table. Ingredients: 4 eggs, their weight in pounded sugar, butter, flour, a 1/4 spoonful of salt, a layer of a kind of jam or marmalade. Beat the butter to a cream, dredge in the flour and pound sugar, stir these ingredients well together and add the eggs, which should be previously thoroughly whisked. When the mixture has been well beaten for about 10 minutes, butter a Yorkshire pudding tin, pour in the batter, and bake in the moderate oven for 20 minutes. Let it cool, spread 1/2 of the cake with a layer of nice preserve, place over it the other half of the cake, press the pieces together, and then cut into long finger pieces. Pile them in a crossbar on a glass dish and serve. Time approximately 20 minutes. The average cost is 1 shilling, 3 ducats, sufficient for 5 to 6 people. Seasonably at any time. Now that would require me to weigh my eggs and weigh my sugar, so I have a scale. I don't really want to use this scale. Might be interesting, but as I always say, you can live like a pioneer without being a pioneer. So today we are not going to be using our scale. We're going to do it the modern way, and that will require us to have a little bit of a different recipe. This is a very simple, easy sponge cake recipe. The first thing it calls for are 6 room temperature eggs. So you can either leave your eggs out for a little while. If you're a pioneer, you might have had your chickens lay them and gone and collected them, use them right away. You can run your eggs under warm water to help them get up to temperature a little bit quicker if they've been in your fridge, but I had mine sitting out, so we're good. Just using this measuring cup as a nice place to put all of my eggshells. If I was an early settler, I would not have had measuring cups, but we're not gonna mess around with a good Victoria sponge, or depending on if you would ask, a good pudding. So we are going to just crack all of our eggs in here, and then we're going to need to whisk them. Now, early settlers, again, no electricity. They would have had to whisk these by hand. I'm not going to do that. I am going to use my trusty beater. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to beat these using my egg beater for 1 minute. So here I have it here. Let's bring it over to the counter. We'll plug it in. I'm gonna go wash my hands, so give me 2 seconds. Of course, before any baking, you wash your hands, but I had washed mine, but now I just want to get the eggs off of them. So we're gonna beat these eggs for about a minute. If you have a KitchenAid mixer or a stand mixer, you can just leave this to go on its own. I don't, so I'm going to stand here for a little while. We'll see you in a minute. Those are very frothy, so let's take a look, guys. Some very frothy eggs here in our bowl. A little hard to see, that's okay. The next thing we will need to do is add 1 cup of sugar. Now, we're going to use the magic of video editing in a minute, because after you add your sugar, 1 cup of sugar, you have to mix again for 8 to 10 minutes. So I don't think you really want to watch me mix the sugar and my eggs for 8 to 10 minutes. So we're gonna do it off camera. If you've watched these videos before, we've talked about sugar. Did early settlers have white sugar? They did. It was very expensive. It could cost the equivalent of about $200 today for a cone of sugar that was about this round on the bottom, about the size of a toonie at the top, that was this tall. Very, very expensive. So they would have generally used things like maple sugar, maple syrup, honey to sweeten their cakes and pies and things like that. But a good Victorian sponge cake is too good to miss if you have sugar. So once there were general stores and things like that that had sugar more often, price started to decrease and people would be able to have these special luxuries a little more frequently. So I will see you in a little bit. I'm gonna go mix this for about 8 to 10 minutes. And we're back. So I've mixed this for about 8 minutes. I have an egg beater, so it worked a little bit faster than like a KitchenAid mixer. So 8 minutes was more than enough. And just look at this, guys. It has certainly at least doubled in size from after the first minute of whisking, just with the eggs and the sugar. So puffy. Hear that? That's my oven, because unlike the pioneers, I'm going to use my modern oven. Not gonna wait for my stove to heat up, because in the early settler times, it would have taken about 3 hours for them to get their stoves hot enough to cook this cake, because this oven needs to be about 350 degrees. Now, my oven just told me it's ready, but I can also test it the pioneer way, and that would be like this. Open my oven, have my hand. If I stick it in the doorway, if I can hold it there for about 8-10 seconds, it's at about 350. If it gets up to 400, it'll only be able to hold my hand there for about 5 seconds when it's at 400 or so. So, perfect temperature. So I have my eggs. What I need now is some flour. I need a cup of flour. I would have had to grind this myself if I was a very early settler. I could have purchased this at the general store otherwise, and some baking powder. I only need about half a teaspoon of baking powder. So, I've told you this before, but let's see if anyone can remember. Who remembers what pioneers used as their measuring cups? That's right, actual cups. If you were an early settler, you would know approximately how much flour or whatever ingredient you needed would fit in your cup, and then you would be able to use it like that. So I need about a teaspoon of baking powder and a little bit of flour. Need a cup of flour. So what I'm gonna mix this all in together, and we'll see you on the other side of that. So everyone, I've been slowly adding in my flour. You don't want to make sure don't over stir, so just enough to make sure that the flour is all incorporated into your dough or your batter. Rather, we're not making bread, even though they sometimes call this cake sandwiches. So just stir it enough that it's all incorporated. Don't want to over stir and deflate your batter after how puffy it got. You need to have parchment paper or silicone paper to line the top or the inside of your cake pan. You don't want to grease the sides at all, so you're going to divide this evenly between 2 cake tins. So I have 2 here, both lined. We will divide this up, and then we can pop it into the oven. Now, after seeing how puffy it got, now you know I had this giant bowl for not too many ingredients. Let's just pour this in this one. I'm going to try and divide it pretty evenly. This is when it's always nice to have a helper. So make this as a family, and then someone can help hold the bowl while you scrape out the last of your batter into your pans. There's one. Let's put the last bit in this side. Let it settle a little bit. You can help it out a tiny bit. Scrape the last bit to the side. And we'll plop it in here. Remember, don't waste. Be a good early settler. Gotta use everything you got. So, scrape this little bit in too. Wipe off that edge so it doesn't burn. And then we will pop these into the oven. Just like so. These are going to cook for about 23 to 28 minutes. So again, 23 to 28 minutes, all depending on your oven. A Pioneer stove would have gotten hotter. It might have flares, so you would have to check it more frequently. But for us, we can leave it in there. Probably about the 25-minute mark will work. After it is cooked, you want to be able to put them on a wire rack so that they can cool. Because you need your cake to be cool if you're going to put your layer of jam in and it doesn't just melt and deflate like you didn't want your batter to deflate when you were mixing it. So I'll come back and I'll check in with you again after our cakes have cooked and have cooled, and we'll make ourselves the last little bit of our Victoria sponge cake. Then here is us just checking on the cake. It looks really good. Oh, look how nice and puffy it is. So it didn't over stir. So we'll see how this comes out of that pan. Let's hope it goes really well, because this could make a really, really nice Victoria sponge cake in the next little while. Hi friends, it is time for another check-in. I have flipped our cakes out of their pans, just came out of the oven. They look really good. So we're gonna try and peel our parchment paper off. If you have silicone paper, it will work as well. It might work better even, but parchment paper works perfect. So I have my first one off. Peel off our second one. Remember, wash your hands before you do this, especially if you're sharing. Right now, you might not be able to share with as many friends, but that would have been the rhyme and reason for picnics. So we might have to try and find some people to social distance our picnic with us later when we tell you about some picnic etiquette. So let this cool. We'll regroup, put some jam in between, slice her up, and then we'll be ready for our picnic. Hi everyone, we are back. We are ready to put our layer of jam on our Victoria sponge cake. They turned out really, really well. So I have one on my plate, and I have a great big jar of raspberry jam, homemade raspberry jam. You can use store-bought, whatever you have works. We're using raspberry because that's what we like. So what you do is get a great big dollop and you put it right in the middle. And you're going to want a generous helping of jam. Because remember, it's not just called Victoria sponge cake, it is also called Victoria sponge sandwiches. So on a sandwich, you don't want just a tiny bit of jam. You want a healthy bit of jam. So spread this around. You just want to be gentle because it is a sponge cake. They can rip, as you can probably see on our wire rack. They rip a bit. It happens. don't worry if it happens to you. So we have our jam here. Spread it on out. Takes a lot of jam, guys. Don't worry, you might need a whole jar if you bought the jam at home. This is obviously a very large jam jar, mason jar that we have here, so we have a fair bit. But if you're using jam bought from a store, it might take the whole jar, depending on the size. So our jam here, this is probably pretty good. Spread it on out. Just like this, try to make it even. Kind of tidy. It'll go over the edges though, so don't worry. It'll happen. Sometimes it's the taste that matters, isn't it? So I have my jam jar here. I'm going to put this down on here to keep it safe. What we need to do now is put our top layer on, sandwich that on, just like that. And friends, really, that's all there really is to your Victorian sponge cake. It is pretty plain. What I recommend doing right before you serve this, especially if you're going to be serving this on pieces on a plate rather than little sandwiches, is getting icing sugar and sprinkling it on top. So that way when you have it, it has a little bit of garnish. Otherwise, that's all it takes. That's your cake. And serve it as is, have some tea, or you can take it on a picnic like we're going to do later. So we'll see you outside for our picnic, but in order to do that, in order to make sure that we're eating our cake properly using proper Pioneer etiquette, we'll go over our etiquette and ideas about picnics when we get outdoors. See you then. Friends, a nice lovely day outside. We are ready for our picnic, so we should go over some Victorian picnic etiquette. Now, picnics were one of the favorite vacations of choice because many people in Victorian times, both in Canada and elsewhere, couldn't necessarily afford to go away for long periods of time. But a single day outing, maybe to a park or the countryside, was possible for them. So they would go on a picnic with their friends. This could be large groups of people and everyone would chip in. So there would be lots of baskets around. Some people might have brought the plates and cups and utensils. Some people might have brought sweets. Some people might have brought sandwiches. It was a team affair. Everybody helped out. So it would be kind of like a potluck. Now, I'm going to read to you what Mrs. Beaton suggests for a very large group for a picnic. So the bill of fare for a picnic for 40 persons: a joint of cold roast beef, a joint of cold boiled beef, 2 ribs of lamb, 2 shoulders of lamb, 4 roast fowls, 2 roast ducks, 1 ham, 1 tongue, 2 veal and ham pies, 2 pigeon pies, 6 medium-sized lobsters, 1 piece of collared calf's head, 18 lettuces, 6 baskets of salad, and 6 cucumbers, plus a whole array of sweets. Stewed fruit, well sweetened into glass bottles, well corked, 3 or 4 dozen plain pastry biscuits to eat with stewed fruit, 2 dozen fruit turnovers, 4 dozen cheesecakes, 2 cold cabinet puddings in molds, 2 blanc ménages in molds, a few jam puffs, 1 large cold plum pudding, this could be good, a few baskets of fresh fruit, 3 dozen plain biscuits, a piece of cheese, 6 pounds of butter, this could of course include the butter for teas, 4 quarter loaves of household bread, 6 dozen rolls, 6 loaves of tin bread for tea, 2 plain plum cakes, 2 pound cakes, 2 sponge cakes, a tin of mixed biscuits, half a pound of tea. Coffee is not suitable, being difficult to make. So, it's an awful lot of stuff to bring with you, but most people probably weren't having 40 people picnics very often. But things like meat sandwiches, meat was a must, at a picnic, so cold meat sandwiches were very popular. You had to make sure that you had comfortable seating. So I have a nice blanket here. Some people would bring along chairs that were collapsible if they had them available, but most of the time you would have just had blankets on the ground, maybe a couple of nice tablecloths to go over your blankets for where your food was going to sit. You were never supposed to bring good china. So never bring good china. What you would bring, however, was tin. So you could have some tin mugs. So I have some here so that I can share some of the things that I have with the folks that are around today, working in other locations. Some tinware. So tin like this, if you're looking for things like this, we have this at the general store at the Fanshawe Pioneer Village. You could also use wooden plates. So these are some replicas of artifacts from our collection. You would also have things like wooden cutlery, but so we have some here. So this would have been for the personal use because you don't want to bring your good silverware and flatware with you. So we have those. We also have bamboo cutlery like this in the general store at Fanshawe Pioneer Village if you're wanting to go on a nice Victorian picnic. The other things you were supposed to bring, a very good knife for cutting any pastries or breads and things like that you brought with you. Like I say, a couple of forks and spoons to use. You were supposed to bring lots of hearty drink. So this could be ale, it could be lemonades, you could bring tea as Mrs. Beaton suggested, but ginger beer would be my particular drink of choice. So I have some ginger beer here to share with folks. So that's most of the stuff out of my basket because someone else would have had to bring along the food. If I was to bring all of these things, I can't carry the food as well. So I have a nice Victorian sponge cake. Oh, look, someone's been enjoying it already. We only have half left. I also have some ice cream. Remember we talked about ice cream, or we will be talking about ice cream in another video. Ice cream, very popular at picnics. It was a very popular summer treat. Obviously, picnics are not necessarily the place to bring ice cream, but you could have made ice cream at your picnic if you were able to transport your ice there easily. So if you were maybe at someone's farm for the day, or if you were close by to home or to an ice vendor, you might have been able to get some ice cream at your picnic as well. The other couple of things that we want to point out is that in the Victorian times, picnics were so popular that they actually became a little bit of a joke in newspapers and things. And one newspaper in England actually joked about a couple of things about picnics. So it says, 1, never bring food to a picnic. Very silly, since you obviously are going to want to have something to eat. But by food, they mean not like a full meal. So sandwiches, sweets, fruit, nuts, those were all acceptable, but not a real meal. You had to bring lots of hearty drink, like I mentioned. So I have my ginger beer here, or my ginger ale here. You were never supposed to bring along children, which you would think picnic would be a great opportunity for children. So the adults could mingle, children could go play. So again, remember, this is a joke. They said to always go home early so that you could then have a hearty meal when you returned home, because obviously being out of doors, you would be a little bit exhausted at the end of the day from all of the fun you were enjoying. So make sure that you had time to have a hearty meal before you needed to go to bed, because obviously, as I mentioned, people were only having this single day vacation. So they were going to put as much activity and enjoyment into it as humanly possible. So they needed to be prepared to go back to work the next day. So you need to have a nice good sleep and a nice big meal so that you're ready to do that. So friends, I'm going to go see if I can find anybody to share my Victorian sponge cake and my ice cream with. I'm gonna enjoy my picnic. If you decide to have a picnic yourselves, please share pictures with us. We would love to see the sandwiches you created. So remember, meat sandwiches, you can get pre-roasted meat to make those. little cakes. Donuts with cream cheese in them were very popular at picnics, as well as if you are not on the clock, maybe you're inviting in some other types of ale, but I'm going to stick to my ginger ale for now. So send us some photos of your picnics and we'll look forward to seeing those. We hope everyone is having a fantastic Dominion Day, and we will see you soon for another edition of Live Like a Pioneer. Have a good afternoon.